emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 104.HE1302, certificate number 53093, the Battle of Bamber Bridge.
Come on. Oh, wait. Before we go in, let me tell you a little about an English pub.
Do you enjoy, and I have never asked a question already so sure of the answer, do you enjoy watching World War II training films?
Yes.
All right, no further questions.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. I love, it reminds me of my childhood watching Armed Forces commercials on the Armed Forces Network, radio and television service.
Oh, of course.
Where they would strip the commercials out of all the US shows we got, but replace them with PDAs about, everything from you should not have unprotected sex or rape anyone. Like literally there would be ads like, hey, Okinawa, let's not rape prostitutes. And you'd be like, oh boy, like
what's going on?
What had to happen for somebody to commission 10 of these ads? And everything from that to like, well, don't put starch in your battle dress uniform. As you know, it's against code, whatever. And there'd be a fun white guy rapping about how you don't want to starch your BDUs.
Oh, so these were not, they weren't even pretending to be television commercials. These were like training films that they had repurposed, like how to prevent VD.
They were 30-second PS. I mean, it wasn't like Colonel Potter was running these for us. Like these were 30-second PSAs in the form of, a lot of them were stateside civilian bicentennial minutes and the like, and similar. But scattered in there were ones both obviously made somewhere central. Alexandria or San Diego had turned out some nicer looking ones, and then just kind of cheesy ones made locally on the base in Korea.
By the guys that joined the army to be in the audio-visual battalion?
That's exactly who they were. My parents had a bunch of friends of those guys because they were all in the base community theater. You'll be shocked to hear.
Right.
Where my family always was hanging out. And so these guys would always come over for dinner and bring the radio plays they had made with a buddy when they were at Fort Dix, or
Yeah.
It was an amazing scene.
They all wore those birth control glasses, I bet.
There were actually quite a few of those. Does the Army have specific frames you have to wear?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Well,
did you learn about that last week? I know you're up on Army etiquette right now.
No,
as we record.
Most of the people at the Army War College that wore glasses were wearing weirdly like glasses it seemed like they got at the base PX, but they weren't issued. Whereas back in the day, I think they issued you glasses and you wore them. You had to wear the glasses.
These are not your prescription, Private, but you will wear them.
And so for a while there in the 2000s, I acquired a bunch of those vintage Vietnam era like issued glasses frames, and I gave them to friends. Like Sean Nelson, I think, from Harvey Danger, wore birth control glasses that he got from me for 5 or 6 years.
Was that the point? It's Saigon chic.
Yeah, exactly. Saigon chic. But I could never. I didn't want to look like a guy that had just gotten his glasses at boot camp, so I never wore them myself.
I can see why you wouldn't want to look like a guy who got his glasses at boot camp.
No, I wanted to look like a guy who got his glasses at fighter pilot school.
Not like Warby Parker, who's brought us this entry in the omnibus.
Wait a minute, really?
No.
Are they sponsoring the show?
Yeah, this is not actually the show.
Oh,
this has all been a lengthy ad for
I was going to be so psyched.
for getting glasses in the mail.
I've never had Warby Parkers, and I think they did sponsor a show at one point that I did, and I never took advantage of the free swag because I couldn't figure out their system. Also, I don't think their glasses are very cool.
You're the kind of person who probably gets a free code in your email and then finds it again 18 months later and is alarmed that it's expired.
Yeah, that's me.
But those old vintage training films are fun.
So you were in Korea during the be all you can be era of Army recruiting.
That's exactly right. Like the funny thing is there were a ton of Army recruitment commercials on too, which,
You're already in the Army.
guess what? This is a captive audience. This is like those, isn't there some civilian equivalent of this? Like, you go to the movies and there's an ad for like, you know what you should do? Go to the movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're already here, Nicole Kidman.
But I have to guess that, well, there's just a bunch of dead air, right? I mean, an episode of Golden Girls is only 21 minutes long.
That's the problem.
And so you've got to fill it with something.
And they could have just put on more shows, but they didn't. They still ran shows in half-hour blocks for scheduling convenience.
Exactly.
But that meant if there was a U.S. 2-minute, 2-second break, they had to cut out all those ads for Febreze and Cinnamon Toast Crunch and put in their own ads for military regulations and policies.
Can you imagine what a cool world it would be if the Army closed circuit television stations just aired 20-minute shows with no commercial breaks, and then it immediately would get off of the half-hour cycle, and you'd be in this weird 20-minute long
You turn on your
cycle.
TV at 7:30, Jeopardy's half over. You turn it on again in an hour, and it's the middle of Big Bang Theory.
I have a friend who was just describing he and his wife were divorced, and they have a custody deal with their kids where they each get 4 days on and then 4 days off.
He's got an 8-day week.
So
It's the French Revolutionary calendar.
they're just tumbling through space where it's like, okay, this week I give the kids back on Saturday, and next week it's on Wednesday.
It's like Ramadan or Yom Kippur moving through the solar calendar.
Yeah, right. Except every
Except
month.
all the time.
How long would it be? Hey, math kid, how long would it be before you caught up to the cycle again?
It depends on what the shows are. If it's exactly 20 minutes, it aligns every hour. If it's 22 minutes and 36 seconds, it's the heat death of the universe.
No, but I mean with the 4-day custody thing.
I see.
How long would that take to
just
play
8
out?
times 7, 56 every 8 weeks.
Every 8 weeks.
That would be 7 of your cycles and 8 of our Earth weeks.
Interesting. Right on, man.
That's so funny. But the funny thing is that's how people watch TV now anyway. You just turn on your TV, and it would be more like going to the movies in 1936 and you just walk in a theater whenever because you've handed a perky young lady a dime, and you walk into the theater, and then they're halfway through a Edward G. Robinson picture, and you stay for that, and then the newsreel, and then the short, and then the cartoon, and then you watch the first half of the Edward G. Robinson picture.
That's what we did in 1976
go
too.
home.
Did you never do that?
That's because you were scofflaws, and they didn't have Centipede in the lobby yet, so you had to go in.
You walk in, you sit down, and you watch the movie all the way through, and then the next movie, and then...
No, I was never even a show up at the box office and watch whatever's starting next. I was definitely a look through the paper.
Oh yeah,
kid.
Look through the paper.
Because that's the best way to find out when a movie's going to start. You look at the newspaper from the night before when all the theaters were telling you.
I think in the 70s, there was definitely a period where adults would take me to the movie theater at any time and just drop me off, give me the amount of a ticket and say, I'll be back at some point.
Your babysitter was Lowe's.
So you just go into the movies and stay there for a while, then come out and play Pac-Man in the lobby until your parents show up.
I do remember more double features where you would sit in the same theater and it would just spool a second movie, which is not happening anymore.
Yeah, why does that? Oh, right. Why would you do that? Why would you give away a second movie?
It's probably the beginning. Those were all single screen theaters. It's the tyranny of the multiplex that got rid of that. It's just more efficient to keep showing the same movie in the same theater and charge again if they want to leave and see a different movie.
Tyranny of the multiplex.
That's my favorite Star Trek movie. I was recently watching a training film from World War II.
Well, wait a minute. You don't have to do it now.
No.
Is this just like you have it's like listening to classic radio? You're like, I'm going to go watch some training films.
This one was recommended to me. I mean, basically it's everything old is funny because it's
old.
It's different and novel, it's
Where's the beef?
in this case it's even older. If you can imagine a cultural artifact older than Clara Peller saying where's the beef. How to Behave in Britain was released in 1943.
Oh, I've seen How to Behave in Britain.
See,
It's great.
I gave it a 5-star review on Letterboxd. It stars no less than Burgess Meredith.
Yes.
Who was still, 33 years away from what is it? Crapping lightning and thunder. What does he say when he's Mick in Rocky? I'm gonna teach you to crap lightning and also crap a second crap, which is thunder. I don't know what the line is.
I don't either.
Okay.
I can quote The Godfather Part 2, but I can't quote Rocky.
You skipped Rocky.
I watched Rocky.
Too much of a jock movie.
Out of the side of my eye, yeah. Even then. But Burgess Meredith he always had a kind of homey, but he seems smart. He's got almost a mid-Atlantic accent.
Yeah, especially in the 30s and 40s when all actors had to.
Yeah.
He was, if you know him just from Rocky, you assume he's some Irish working class type. And that's not true. No. He's from the Midwest. He's from Ohio. He's from money. He was a big star on Broadway. And so when they made Of Mice and Men in 1939, he played, George, I think. Could he have played George instead? Yeah, he played George. That's right. He can't have played Lenny. And that made him a movie star. I always think George is the dumb one because if you're doing the dumb one impression, you say George a lot. Yeah. Tell me again about the rabbits, George.
But George is the smaller, fast talking, smart one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spoilers. He
sorry.
Shoots Lenny. No, I'm going to spoil it. Spoilers from the 1920s.
He's also, Burgess Meredith is famously in Twilight Zone.
He was the Penguin in Batman, and he's in a bunch of good Twilight Zones, specifically the one where he steps on his Warby Parkers.
That's it.
And thereby discovers that the apocalypse is not good, as he had assumed it was going to be, but a bummer.
Although, I've thought about that episode a lot, and it seems like you could teach yourself how to grind a pair of glasses pretty easily and just go to the local, optometrist and
That's so you that your response is, if that were me... Listen. I would learn how to smelt metal and blow glass.
All that stuff. I mean, if you've got infinite time.
Couldn't he just go to a bunch of empty, abandoned optometrist offices full of bodies and try to find...
Till he found the glasses that did the best.
Yeah, the world is now full of 1,000 pairs of glasses.
Yeah, that's exactly what he would have done.
That's what he did in the sequel. They should have done a reunion episode in the 80s Twilight Zone where a now older Burgess Meredith, fresh off of Clash of the Titans and Rocky III, Figures it out. It's a whole episode about him silently finding glasses.
Yeah, he walks around in a funk for a couple of days. Then he's like, wait a minute.
But then it ends with the twist is it actually, even that guy would have been super unhappy living in a post-apocalyptic wasteland reading Dickens and Thackeray because it's literally the end of the world. And the fact that he has more time for reading is just rounding error compared to all the hardships and zombie gangs that await him.
I guess it's true that what it does is it asks the question, why do we read? Is it not to make the world a better place? It's not just onanistic. It's got to be for a reason.
If you remember that episode, it strongly implies that it's just escapism for him.
Yeah.
He's got an awful, mean boss and a shrewish wife, and he just wants to hide in the basement reading Dickens.
But maybe the secret is kill your mean boss and shrewish wife, then you don't need to read.
You don't need the Russians.
Yeah.
You don't need missiles.
No, you just need to murder 2 people instead of 200 million.
Let's assume that at maximum he has 7 or 8 people that irritate him. He can become a medium ambition serial killer.
Yeah.
Kill all 7 or 8 of those people. I mean, it's going to be tough because he might be the only commonality and all these bodies are going to be turning on.
Why did these random people get killed? Oh, wait a minute.
He needs to invite them to an event, arrange for the ceiling to collapse, and then, hope that he can get away with it on sabotage grounds.
There's another option that I think about, which is, and I'm always confused why people don't choose this option. Move to a neighboring town. Put gas in your car and drive away from the terrible place and go make a new terrible place somewhere.
Burgess Meredith joined the Army in World War II. As a big Hollywood star, he was frequently put out on loan or whatever from his own unit
because he was already in his 30s
to make training films. Yeah, let's see. He made those Grumpy Old Men movies in the mid-90s. I think he died in the late 90s. He would have been, he was born in 1907. So he would have been in his mid-30s during World War II. In this particular video, he plays an American telling our fighting men and women, but at the time mostly men, stationed in Great Britain, how to be good guests of the British Empire.
Don't rape prostitutes.
It's essentially that, but in kind of a nicer way. Famously, there was a lot of raping going on, and quasi-raping going on.
Even now.
Yeah. But we think of the wholesome servicemen overseas in Britain in the 40s. And in fact, the British were sick of the Americans. They famously said they're overpaid. Just like today. They're overpaid, oversexed, and over here. So the complaints would be that these guys had more money than anybody else in the village that they could flash around. They could use it to buy silk stockings and nylons for everybody's daughters and get the company that they were not getting at home. So it was a real disruption to British life, but particularly town and village life.
Maybe Chamberlain shouldn't have appeased Hitler in Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Blame the victim.
How do you like it now?
I think we can all agree that this is mostly Hitler's fault.
Right.
And not some
you don't
not
blame
some
the
yokel
victim.
from Oregon.
But they could have stopped Hitler at Munich.
They could have stopped Hitler at Munich. I guess this is
not.
1943. So by this time, the army, this is not preemptive. The army is already aware that things have taken a bad turn in many parts of the United Kingdom, and they've dispatched none other than our secret weapon in World War II, Burgess Meredith.
Yeah.
To tell the boys to be on their best behavior.
To explain to the Americans, model yourselves after the British in India. See how beloved they were?
Well, that's a funny thing, because we're going to get into questions of race in particular here, which comes up in this Burgess Meredith video. And it's not like the British were at the same time this video is made, the British are orchestrating the Bengali famine and killing 3 million people in India. Not orchestrating on purpose, but through bad leadership and hoarding and inflation. They don't care if 3 million Bengalis die. They're not good on the Irish. They're castrating gay people. It's not quaint, enlightened village society full of church socials.
But the key,
jumble sales.
The key to the film has to be that the army is not running a sociology experiment. The army is making this film because it feels that there's an expedient need to have the British not turn on them.
That's exactly right. And if you watch, some of my favorite movies from this period are propaganda movies ordered by the British War Cabinet to appease relationships between the special relationship forming between Americans overseas and their British hosts, because it was a legitimate morale problem for both civilians and soldiers alike.
Yes.
In this video, it's a funny video. You should watch How to Behave in Britain. There's a lot of little light comedy to keep the soldiers watching. It's under 40 minutes, but that's for a training film. That's
pretty long.
Probably drags.
Yeah.
Bob Hope shows up. A lot of it is just, here's what you do in a pub. This is not a saloon from back home. These are people that just, unspoken is, do not come here and get drunk as fast as you can and get rowdy. This is a place where people without a lot of discretionary income will
get drunk really slowly.
Will nurse
and stay drunk all afternoon.
They just want to sing and talk loudly for 6 hours, and they don't need you, Joe, with your flashy Brooklyn ways,
right?
Messing up the darts game. So they've got a video where a couple Americans walk into a village pub, and they immediately make fun of the Scottish soldiers' kilts. They disrupt a board game. They, they're aggressive to a barmaid, and Meredith just makes them disappear in a puff of smoke.
Turn their MAGA hats on backwards and start talking about taxation.
They make the jukebox play Lee Greenwood.
Uh-huh.
Burgess Meredith makes them disappear in a cloud of smoke. He apparently has superpowers in this universe.
Right.
I don't know what number Earth this is where Burgess Meredith can make naughty GIs. I don't know if he kills them or if they reappeared back on base in an MP cell. It's not clear.
It's an interesting alternate universe where World War II is still being fought. Burgess Meredith does not use his magic to become a super weapon.
He could instantly make Hitler disappear in a cloud of smoke from the bunker and reappear in an Allied
why don't
jail.
we parachute him into Germany if he can do this and send him around, make Goering appear at the bottom of the ocean.
Like move tanks so they run over their own soldiers. All you'd have to do is move a tank like 8 feet every few minutes, and that battle is over.
Instead, he's in this pub meddling with people that are having a good time.
Yeah,
a perfectly good time.
Yeah, those kilts are kind of funny when you think about it.
Give me more beers.
The video goes out. He goes to great lengths in the film to point out that your beer will be warm.
Oh my God!
They don't ask for ice here.
So the first time I went to England, when I was not yet 21, I went into a little pub in the town the little town called Pretty, England, south of Bath. My mother's maiden name was Pretty, and she thought that I should go to Pretty because it seemed like that might be where we're from.
There's no genealogical evidence of this.
We had no proof, but Pretty was her name, and
Pretty was her town.
Pretty was her game.
This is nice.
And so I'm out there, I'm wandering around England, and I'm like, okay, I'll find Pretty. It's seriously got a maypole in the square. There's sheep all around it. There was one pub, it's just a crossroads. And it took me a while to get there because I was hitchhiking and sort of like, hey, can you take me to Pretty? And they're like, I can get you close. And I went into a pub and I ordered a beer, and I had never had a warm beer, and I didn't.
Was it life-changing?
And no one had prepared me for it.
No Burgess Meredith had appeared to be like, these cheese and pickle sandwiches will not be delicious, but you will eat them, soldier.
It had never been explained to me. And so, I was like, can I have a beer? I'm a Pretty, and everybody in England is like, yeah, right.
Nobody was hoisting
no
glasses to your...
Every American that goes to England is like, I'm from here. My people are from England. And I had this beer, and it was just like, it was basically eating a loaf of liquid bread, except like bread right out of the oven. And, it was appalling. It took me a long time to learn to like it. You've never had a beer, so this is meaningless.
I assume it's still appalling. You've just had to accustom yourself, like a citizen of the globe.
One of the things about alcohol is it's terrible. Also, coffee is terrible. These are things that we convince ourselves
the problem with coffee is it smells good.
It does.
Like there's so many alcohol. Beer smells bad.
Yeah.
Weed smells bad.
Yes.
Coffee, that's why it's the devil's. That's why it's the foot in the door.
It smells like chocolate.
From Lucifer himself.
Yeah.
It smells good. Burgess also warns people, they're going to ask if you want a bitter or a mild. I don't know. You'll figure it out. The bitter is bitter and the mild is mild, I guess. He clearly doesn't care that much. No. But the most noteworthy part of the film, he's getting off a train with another GI, and a woman on the train, he's in uniform. The woman on the train is talking to both of them and says, oh, what a lovely chat we had. I hope you'll come visit us when you're next in the village. We'd love to have you over for tea, and perhaps we could see the flower show, or whatever.
Was it Graham Chapman in a dress?
I think. No, it's just a Miss Marple type.
Stone him.
And the interesting thing is that the other soldier with Burgess at this point is black. He's an African-American soldier. And she's perfectly friendly to both of them and wants them all to come over. And the point of this part of the movie is to let white GIs know that this is going to happen. So after this,
British people are not racist.
British people are going to be less racist, and you can't let it. I know, but you can't let it
freak you out.
You can't let it throw you off your game. He conspiratorially. That's not how you say that. He conspiratorially. There we go. Move the I. He turns to the camera and says, he just kind of shrugs like, "Well, look, man.
What do you know?
I mean, it's
black people can go to restaurants here."
He calls the black soldier throughout a colored boy.
Yeah.
Which obviously not ideal. At the time, colored would have been sensitive. Even at the time, I think I would have struck boy. It's not great. This guy's this guy's around 30.
But boy also has a lot of connotations that then would have been significant, right? It's not just an accident that he's saying boy.
No, I think, and you'll see later in the movie, things are very coded to be like, and here's something for the most racist 10% watching this, and here's something for the... So, he just explains in kind of euphemistic terms, there's less social restrictions over here. social restrictions. like it's just an arbitrary matter of which fork to use.
Raping is still out,
Right.
but
That what you just saw might not happen at home, but hey, we're not at home, and different customs, when in Rome, essentially.
so no, okay, go on.
And he never specifically says anything like, at home you would never want the races mixing because that leads to, he just says, in kind of euphemistic terms, we have social restrictions. The place where you're stationed in Britain might not.
And what does the black soldier, what does his face betray anything in this moment?
He gets no agency, whatever.
He doesn't look into the camera and give 2 thumbs up.
He doesn't look at the camera and give like a Jim Halpert face like, yeah, I know. Like if any of you are watching this from the truck battalion, I'm really sorry. No, he has a nice moment. Meredith just treats him like a peer. It turns out neither of them have cigarettes, and the guy's like, I'll go buy us some cigarettes, and that gets him out of the movie. Because I think a certain segment of the audience has already had to look at a black person for a while and is getting nervous.
He doesn't turn to the camera and go, this is why James Baldwin moved to Paris.
See, I think the thing is the average white soldier, whether they're from Tennessee or Arizona or Massachusetts, has no idea that there's a thriving European intellectual scene that welcomes America's great black artists.
Right.
This
And
is
why would they?
This is maybe in the New Yorker, but your average GI is shocked that the whole world is not Jim Crow all the time.
Well, and a lot of that like vibrant African American diaspora into Europe came after the war, right? Because this was the exposure that they were like, wait a minute.
I mean, not entirely. I think a lot of the Josephine Baker Jazz Age stuff is before.
Yeah, right. That's true.
But you're right. This is kind of the beginning of James Baldwin being like, and a bunch of people being like, wait, I was treated like crap over here and not over there. The scene goes on. I think Burgess heads into the little canteen or whatever it is at the station and says, look, let's go talk to General Lee.
Wait a minute.
Well, the ghost of Robert E. Lee appears.
Do you mean like a Dodge Charger?
Let's go speak to this car with stars and bars on it. No, he actually says, well, look over there at the bar. It's General Lee of the Supply and Service Corps or whatever, Yeah. And it's this white guy. And then Burgess makes 2 points. One, hey, he oversees a lot of these colored soldiers, giving us logistical supply and support over here. But also, his grandpappy fought with the Confederacy. So it's stated, but not it's implied, but not stated that this is a direct descendant of Robert E. Lee.
Oh,
so he's now going to speak to our Southern white troops with some authority.
Okay.
So Burgess goes up to him and says, what do you think about this, General Lee? And General Lee
turns to the camera and goes, "States' rights."
Well, I think he might be a real officer because he's not a good actor.
Oh,
He turns to the camera and gives some prepared spiel about how, this isn't about what you think. It's really about a promise that we've made that people of all colors and creeds are going to get a fair shake in today's army as we fight tyranny at home and abroad. And he's referring to, I think, the 1940 Selective Service and Training Act, which by FDR's signature said that basically the Army's not integrated, but black soldiers get a fair shake and they get the same opportunities that a white soldier would.
The same opportunities to work in the kitchen.
Well, that's what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, in practice, this did not happen. The Tuskegee Airmen and the Red Tails were the exceptions. In fact, of the 2.5 million black kids who signed up for selective service, most of them weren't inducted just because the chain of command was like, no, thank you. And of the 1.5 million who did serve, a huge number who did serve, the vast majority were in kind of secondary, less prestigious support roles. Still dangerous, still grueling and difficult work. They were not, many on or near the front lines, but
Doris Miller out there shooting them down.
That's the Pearl Harbor guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know how I know that?
How?
1980s Army PSAs. You will not imagine. You can imagine how many of these highlighted the few examples of representation that the Army could point to in its history. Because in the 80s, it was a much more diverse Army, obviously. General Lee says, we've made a promise to these men. And I think at this point, our friend has come back with the cigarettes. And so he can kind of be used as a visual aid.
He waves his hand at him. We've made a promise to these men.
To these people.
Fellows? these fellers?
What do you mean by your kind, General? And he kind of frames it as like and this goes both ways. It's kind of we all need to be more, respectful and live and let live with the other fella, so as if it were an equal problem on both sides.
Sure.
That the black soldiers had been very unwelcoming of their white superiors.
Stop mentioning that 40 acres, damn it. We're tired of hearing about it.
And then Meredith and his African-American compatriot share a cigarette. But they literally bring in a
like one cigarette?
Yeah, it's very
they pass
sexy.
It back and forth?
It's very sexy.
Do they French inhale?
They literally bring on a white old plantation southerner to say, well, this is what's got to happen if we're going to beat the Nazis, boys. Like,
you're sometimes going to have dinner with a local lady
who doesn't hate black people as much as you. Your country has made and it's funny how they frame it. Your country's made a commitment, and hey, unsaid, we might all disagree with it, but that's just how it is in this man's army. And of course, it was a tough war for a lot of these 1.5 million kids. One of the most famous stories was a black colonel named Rupert Trimmingham, told a story about being at some camp in Louisiana where German POWs were being housed. And this is kind of the beginning of the story you may know about him observing firsthand that these German POWs were treated better than the black servicemen at the same base.
Yeah.
Essentially, it became a segregated Jim Crow post where the Germans were white, so they got to eat with the white officers and enlisted men. They got to use the same latrines and drinking fountains, and the black soldiers were literally getting treated worse than Nazis. And this was the kind of thing it was very much a purposeful humiliation. Like, we want you to see that the POWs are a rank above you, presumably. And the Germans were smug about it, and all the soldiers could sense this. This made, he told the story enough that it made news, first in the black press, and then I think he wrote to an army paper, to an armed services magazine, and then it got out, and it was eventually fictionalized in, the Saturday Evening Post or something, and made a lot of comment, because for a lot of kind of wishy-washy liberals at home, this was, or even non-liberals, this was a step too far, that Nazis of all people were getting nicer food and cigarettes, whereas, these black servicemen were not.
Ken, if we here at Omnibus were going to hire some employees, which we probably should do.
Let's hire like 30 people today.
If we hired 30 people, how would we begin to manage all those employees? Neither you nor I want to be in the HR business.
Just onboarding them, doing all the training and stuff they need, doing continuing feedback so you can continue to monitor their performance.
I have no idea what the current compliance issues are. How often do employees get breaks? What happens if they don't come to work for weeks at a time?
All the regulatory stuff. What are we going to do? Are we going to hire 30 people and an HR department?
Well, let me tell you what, HR issues can kill a small business, and HR expenses could drive us right into the ground.
$80,000 a year, right? To pay an HR manager?
Well, that's the average, but here in Seattle, a lot more than that.
So what do we do, John? Solve my problem that you just invented.
Well, here's what we do. We hire Bamber, which is to say that for $99 a month, we employ Bamber.com to act as virtual HR managers for our company.
Virtual. They're available by phone, email, and chat, so they can run all the ongoing HR stuff that our 30 new employees will require for onboardings, terminations, because we're going to fire a lot of them. 30
first 28.
30 is just too many people.
Uh-huh. All their HR managers are based in the United States. They're all experienced HR managers that understand business nuances across all 50 states. They can customize their policies to fit your business or our business in this case.
They have a autopilot product that automates a lot of what an HR department would do. So, policies, training, feedback, all that stuff just gets taken care of by itself. I think we should do it. I think we should hire these 30 people.
I think so too. And I think we will join their thousands of active clients and we'll end up giving thousands of 5-star reviews. You and I together.
If you are looking to hire 30 people like John and I are, schedule a free conversation with Bambi today and you'll be amazed at how much they can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com/omnibus right now.
That's BAMBEE.com/omnibus.
Bambi.com/omnibus.
What's interesting is that England is marginally less racist than the United States, but also extremely racist.
So the interesting thing in the 40s is that this is 5 years before the Windrush generation, before West Indian immigration to the UK begins in earnest.
But there would have been a lot of Caribbean and African people living in England at the time.
I guess not enough of a critical mass that threatens the majority. Like if your theory of racism is LBJ's, which is that the people at the bottom of the ladder need to feel like they have somebody to kick. I'm sure that's not what he said. It probably his version.
He said it in some homey aphorisms.
His version maybe had something about a horse's penis in it.
Listen to me, boy.
Who knows? He's probably.
But he's talking to another congressman,
and he's 3 inches away from Everett Dirksen's nose at the time.
Truly a hero.
Like if that's what you believe, that that people can be kindly about racial differences and avert their prejudices when it doesn't threaten their job or their sense of their own social status.
Right.
But as soon as they feel like, what's all this then? Well, now there's 10 of them. Now there's 100 of them. There were only 10 of them a week ago.
They're taking our jobs.
These Italians are taking over our neighborhoods. These Irish are taking over our jobs. Look, we all know.
Listen, I'm not racist, but the Italians are taking over this neighborhood.
I'm just saying that this was a time when your average British person probably hated the Irish, was all in favor of
still true.
Starving 3 million, Bengal farmers.
Probably still true.
But had no particular animus against black people because it's kind of like the entry we did about the Ghanaian kid who wants to go to Greenland.
Right.
This is the only one their village has ever seen. And what a curiosity, what a treat it would be to have him over and hear his story. They presumably know enough about American segregation to think, this is a problem that our culture, we can feel superior about because our culture does not have at the moment. So they can feel good about themselves by inviting somebody over to tea. And it appears to help that the black GIs are for one thing, they're super cool. They know how to jitterbug.
Yep.
All the young people are excited because they symbolize jazz and swing and everything that already means cool to young British
was
people.
cool in Weimar, Germany.
It's cool to me. I'm jitterbugging right now.
But you just said those jazz cigarettes smelled bad.
Yeah, I guess I draw the line too. The other thing is that they're super well behaved. Like they are the only soldiers that are not catcalling the village girls. And it's not because they are all noble Sidney Poitiers.
No, they know.
It's because they would get lynched back home. Yeah. Right. So they are super careful because of this forced docility that Jim Crow has imposed upon them. But that really plays well in these little British villages because, George Orwell famously wrote, the general consensus of opinion, he's talking about how badly behaved all the Americans overseas were. The general consensus of opinion seems to be that the only American soldiers with decent manners are Negroes. So this was just what everyone observed. Like, these are the good ones.
Right.
But that was not true in the army. I was reading there's a famous quote from a GI who was doing, a black GI who was on the beaches at D-Day doing whatever kind of support work his battalion was allowed to do, who says, our biggest enemy was our own troops, always. They felt like they were fighting 2 wars, and honestly, it was 10 white officers for every German that worried them.
For sure.
And even when they got back home, there's famous cases like, and this is the case, this probably helped this is probably what led to Truman integrating. They got back home and they were treated, they kind of expected that baseline level of respect that we were talking about in Europe, and it was as bad as ever at home, or worse, because the white racists were like, okay, we got to make sure that just because these kids are in uniform, they don't think they're better than us or they can change anything. The famous case was a guy named Isaac Woodard going home just to see his wife after being let out of the army. He heads back to Winsboro, South Carolina, asks a Greyhound bus driver to pull over so he can use the restroom. The driver, is predictably unfriendly to this black passenger asking a favor. The Isaac Woodard is not taking any crap after coming home from war and tells the driver what's what. The driver calls the police. Woodard gets taken to a South Carolina prison, and a police officer gouges out his eyes with a blackjack, which is
not a sharp implement. A blackjack.
Yeah,
it's like a little leather sap, right?
Yeah,
How do you gouge out somebody's eyes with it?
I mean, gouging's more of a.
That's terrible.
It was awful, and the pictures are awful, and they made it became an NAACP cri de coeur, and was one of the facts that led to Truman integrating the Army. So a tough experience for a lot of these 1.5 million service members. But in Britain, the Army had actually requested that troops be segregated. They had gone to the British government and said, we'd like to keep our troops separate at all times like we would at home. And the War Cabinet actually refused to enforce it. They didn't want that hassle. So you had the cases of these, what they would have called at the time, Negro service members wandering these villages, going to pubs where they were generally pretty welcome. They would get invitations to people's homes. Everybody wanted them to come to church on Sunday.
Except getting in fights with other American soldiers, presumably.
That's
right?
what's going to happen here. Yeah. Everything back on the base was much less hunky-dory, but in town, the villagers would tend to side with them. When they were treated badly, a bunch of nice old ladies and codgers from the village would write letters to the paper complaining about how we saw this nice young man mistreated. There was a serviceman named Leroy Henry who had been falsely accused of rape and sentenced to death. Half of all the U.S. servicemen executed during World War II were black, despite the fact that only they were 10% of the Army and almost none in combat roles. And it was largely this kind of anti-miscegenation policing, I think. The Henry guy was innocent, and it led to a massive petition campaign in the UK. All the good people of Bath writing to the U.S. Army, writing to the War Department and the U.S. government saying this man was innocent. And in the end, President Eisenhower actually, what can the president do?
Pardoned him?
Commute it? Pardoned him, I think, yeah. So in general, the locals in Britain would side with the much put upon African-American soldiers. So we jump from Burgess Meredith to the other great 20th century Burgess, Anthony Burgess. Long before writing A Clockwork Orange, he was...
Wait a minute, is this a Connections?
That's right. This is going to be all people named Burgess. Unfortunately, there's only two.
Yeah.
He was stationed in a little town in Lancashire during the war called Bamber Bridge. It's outside of Preston, not that far from, I don't know, what else is even up in there in Lancashire?
That's the thing. It's outside of Preston, which is outside of...
Nothing. I mean, it's closest to Liverpool, I guess. I mean, 4,000 holes in Blackburn, Lancashire. I guess Blackburn. Blackburn's the big city up there. I got there eventually. Thank you.
Did.
Thank you, John
Beatles.
Lennon. He was stationed there during the war, and he wrote... I think in the late 40s, about an incident he recalled where the local officers had come in and told the three pubs in Bamber Bridge that they were not allowed to serve
Black American.
Yeah, Black American soldiers. And this, again, it's not a Britain where every village has a few like West Indian guys. Like these were the only black people for miles around. I mean, I guess until you got to the port in Liverpool, probably. Because they would have to segregate. And all three pubs agreed, okay, we'll segregate. And they put out signs that said black soldiers only. So this is the story that got told for many years as background to what happened in June 1943. On June 24th, 1943, there was a little thatched roof pub in Bamber Bridge. At one of these, the Burgess probably remembered pulling the black soldiers only gambit, called the Old Hob Inn. And on that night, there were, a fair group of people drinking at the pub. There's a large group of African-American soldiers from the nearby 1511th Quartermaster Truck Company. How would you say that in the Army if it's a 4-digit number before the th? Is it the 1511th? Is it the 1511th? On MASH, they say the 4077th, but that's not helping me here. Is it the 1511th Quartermaster Truck Company?
I think that's what I would say, but I was never in the Army, so I don't think 1511th, but maybe.
I don't know what's better.
1511.
There's no way they're saying 1000.
No, it's true.
The artillery would hit before they got through with the syllables.
1511th.
Yeah, it's 1511th.
Let's say 1511th. That sounds cool and tough.
So 10 guys from the 1511th Quartermaster Truck Company are enjoying a beer with some local villagers. Last call has just passed, which apparently is 10 p.m. at the time. And maybe to this day,
true
right?
Until now, yeah.
Is it 11 now? I'm trying to remember.
No, I think bars close at 10.
Yeah, I was very surprised when the pub on the corner near where I was staying last time in London we were walking back from a show or whatever, and it was shut up tight at 10:30 or whatever.
There's this whole, I think, social theory that what happens in England, why there are so many drunk rowdies, is that bars close at 10, and so everybody spends the last hour in the pub just throwing down, and then they're all trashed. Whereas if they left them open until 2, you have that attrition of people gradually wandering off.
The incident here starts when a group of people, some villagers, but also soldiers, begin pestering the barmaid for one more round. One more round of pints.
Come on.
And she won't do it. Sharon or whoever won't do it because it's just after
rules.
10.
Yeah.
She's being a good barmaid. Eventually, I think some MPs from nearby Preston see that the pub is getting rowdy, and they come in to try to settle everybody down, and they see that one of the black soldiers, one Private Eugene Nunn, is not in his Class A uniform. He's wearing a field jacket.
Oh, okay.
Which I guess is a pretty big faux
Out of
pas.
uniform. Yeah, you're in town.
And he doesn't have a pass. So he's 0 for 2. In town without a pass and not in his uniform. So they arrest him. Now, I have to say, I don't have numbers here, but I would imagine that he was far from the only soldier drinking in a pub that night in a British town without a pass and not in uniform. It was, my guess is in a lot of these places, it was not uncommon, but he was not white. So it's quite possible that the arrest was a little swifter than it would have been otherwise.
Were most of his companions white? Or was he in a white MPs and a group of black
This
soldiers? Truck
company is, I think, like 100% black enlisted men and then nearly all white officers. But he's drinking with a bunch of British women from the Auxiliary Territorial Service. So white British ladies. And the villagers and the British women they immediately back Nunn. Oh, come on. We were all asking for a drink. It was all a bit of fun. Nobody's actually making any trouble. He wasn't, why are you arresting him? He wasn't doing anything. And maybe even, it's commonplace to just be in a pub having a drink at 9 p.m., This
is uncannily like a scenario you might see play out in America today.
Exactly.
Like a guy not doing anything, getting arrested.
And then a bunch of people standing there being like,
what are you doing?
Why would you arrest him?
And then it just gets crazier and crazier.
It gets just crazier and crazier. And that's what happens here. As the MPs leave with Private Nunn, the soldiers, the villagers, and the members of the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women. And again, this is maybe one thing that sparks the MPs is that these black soldiers are having a good time with these white British women.
Sure.
Which, no.
No.
And a bottle gets thrown at the windscreen of the MP's Jeep.
But unlike contemporary American police, they don't jump out and shoot everybody.
Not yet. They do drive off, but they decide to come back with reinforcements. The GIs, meanwhile, all head back, walk back to Adams Hall, the camp near town, which is their base. But the MPs, now with reinforcements, follow them back, and at this point, things start to escalate.
Also, they don't go back to the Hob Inn
No, they are.
Bust the girls. They follow the GIs back to the base.
I think the GIs maybe and the girls are just kind of leave the pub at the same time. It's already been last call. They're gonna be good and walk back to base, but the MPs follow them, feeling harassed. The soldiers, who again have had a few, they begin to throw bottles and cobblestones at the MPs. And the MPs fire on them. Shooting a Private William Crossland in the back and killing him. So now this, these 10 guys who just want to drink and MPs trying to bring in the one who's there without a pass have turned into a dead black man on the streets of Bamber Bridge. So when the men from Adams Hall get, this is happening very near the camp. When they get back to when the men from the Quartermaster Truck Company get back to the old 1511th, they tell everybody what's happened, and rumors begin to spread. And now you've got 100 black soldiers worried about what's going to happen, and they all go for their rifles.
Oh boy!
They head for the armory, and everybody arms up.
It's like the movie Taps.
It's turning into a full-fledged mutiny. Yeah. There is one black officer, apparently, in this truck company, a black second lieutenant, who is able to kind of broker some peace and talk the men down and say, no, that we're going to figure this out and take care of this. It's not what you think. Please don't do this. It's going to end badly. The men stand down until just about an hour later at midnight, when the MPs, having got still further reinforcements from Preston, pull up in a convoy of Jeeps that are now kind of makeshift armored vehicles. They've attached a machine gun.
So no one has taught them de-escalation techniques.
No, particularly on this side. And you'd think, again, this would not happen. They would not pull up at a white camp with a machine gun bolted to their Jeep after,
Yeah, the problem is over now. Now they want get back.
At this point, the reports are pretty confused, but we have, dozens of armed soldiers and improvised armored car. In one account, the MPs, the men leave the base with the rifles in pursuit of the MPs. In one account, the MPs set up a roadblock and ambushed them. The soldiers warn all the villagers to stay inside because they know what's going to happen. And in fact, it does. A firefight breaks out between a machine gun and all these rifles in the town of Bamber Bridge in Lancashire, which lasts for 4 hours.
Whoa!
4-hour firefight.
Till 4 in the morning.
Until 4 in the morning in the streets of this thatched roof village. Nobody else dies apart from Private Crossland, who killed in the initial clash.
Well, you have to say that the black soldiers were part of a truck company.
that doesn't explain the MPs.
The MPs just can't control the machine gun because they bolted it to the back of a Jeep.
They're all shooting like stormtroopers. Yeah, maybe neither side the elite troops. But 7 people are injured. It makes news eventually all over the world, but it's really played down. Oh, a thing I didn't mention is this is June 1943. And this doesn't come up in any of the accounts of the report. The newspaper accounts are all very whitewashed and just play it off as a little clash. Rowdy soldiers, drink.
A fun little scuffle.
In some of the accounts, race is never even mentioned, although in the U.S. papers, it is pretty much like black soldiers face off against white MPs in mutiny attempt. But June 24th was just days after a massive race riot in Detroit. There were 5 big race riots in America in the summer of 1943. The Zoot Suit riot will probably be an omnibus entry at some point.
I'm surprised it hasn't been.
I know, right? The one in Detroit, the underlying causes are pretty clear, and they're honestly not that different than today. In the case of Detroit, though, specifically during the war, you had this mass African-American diaspora coming north to take all these wartime jobs, which led to new clashes in what had previously been wider immigrant neighborhoods. It was also the Italian and the Czech guys who felt like they were being pushed out by this new immigrant class. In the case of the Detroit riots, I think a rumor had incorrectly spread that white cops had killed a black mom or a baby. But the underlying causes were, everybody knew the cases of police brutality that had happened, the, corrupt officials and law enforcement. Anyway, massive riot breaks out. The whole black part of town of this neighborhood burns down. And this would have been in the papers and would have been on the minds of the black soldiers drinking that night in Lancashire just a couple days later.
Right, of course.
So there's tensions from across the globe that are playing into it as well. I don't think that timing is a coincidence. But in the months to come, there are court-martials held. First, for the four men. In the first case, 4 men are convicted from the initial clash in and around the pub. In the second trial, 28 men get convictions result from the later clash in front of Adams Hall, and then in the firefight in the streets of Bamber Bridge.
Any of them the white MPs?
No, none of the defendants are they called defendants in a military trial, in a court-martial? I don't know. All of them are black. None of them are white. But interestingly, even though 32 of these cases result in convictions, I think, over half of the cases result in convictions, the president of the court-martial actually grants all the men clemency, saying that it's clear from studying the event that this was actually mismanagement. It was bad leadership. The court-martial found that racial slurs had been flung early and often, beginning at the pub. And you'd think that the N-word would not be a deal killer in 1943, but apparently the president of the court-martial wasn't having that.
Right.
And he used that as evidence that this was a broader disciplinary problem than a few enlisted men acting up. This was handled badly at all levels. The men got clemency, and I guess there are still bullet holes in the bank across the street today.
Huh.
But it's an interesting genre of case that was repeated all over the world. There's a series of these stories of the U.S. trying to basically U.S. soldiers trying to impose, or the Army trying to impose Jim Crow society on other parts of the world that were not having it. Like in this case, the proximate cause was not necessarily. It didn't help that they were with white women, and really didn't help that the villagers were supporting them. That in Burgess's story, this was a bar that had put up a black soldiers only sign, and that all the villagers turned with the black soldiers on the MPs.
Wait, this is in Burgess's movie?
No, sorry, Anthony Burgess of A Clockwork Orange.
Okay.
No. The nice black kid in Burgess Meredith's movie
did not
just buys cigarettes and leaves the movie. The Army, like Hollywood, not ready for a black leading man in 1943. But this happened again in Australia in 1942. What's called the Battle of Brisbane was a similar bar fight that turned into a military engagement because in this case there's fewer racial overtones. It was more a case of oversexed, overpaid, and over here. It was just guys being dopes, and the British troops got better rations than the Australian troops. They were paid better. They had a bad attitude about it. So it's just a case of having even worse manners than an Australian in an Australian bar. But the racial undertones were definitely, I think historians agree, part of this animus between the Australian and the American troops, because they were like the villagers of Bamber Bridge. The Australian troops expected to fraternize with both, and didn't like it when they were told by the Americans that the bars should be segregated. And the 1945 one in New Zealand is even more racialized. What's called the Battle of Manners Street in Wellington had a bunch of white Americans out at a pub when an integrated group of New Zealand soldiers come in, both Maori and Kiwi Pakeha, like white and Maori soldiers come in together, as they typically were, because there was no segregation in the New Zealand military, and much less in society at that time. And the soldiers were like, oh no, we're not going to have that in here. And they're told...
Great impression of a drunk soldier,
Thank you. They're told to lump it, and they eventually take off their belts and say, we're going to give these Maoris a hiding if they drink in the same bar with us, good white folks. So that turned into a bar fight. That turned into a punch-up, as you'll imagine. So 3 countries in which these racially informed bar fights break out because our attempts to export Jim Crow are failing. And you point out that it doesn't mean that these were perfectly non-racist societies who had beaten it, but they were, I guess, just not at the point of feeling threatened by black immigration. So it was not a societal problem.
What's interesting, there was a movie in 1970 called, it was actually a TV movie called Carter's Army. And it starred Richard Pryor and Billy D. Williams.
Yeah.
It was like an ABC movie of the week. And it was about black soldiers in World War II, but it was done in a Black Power context. And
I want to see this.
Within the movie.
It's been re-released as Black Brigade on DVD
Brigade,
in order to,
It's got Rosie Greer in it.
This cast is amazing. It has Glenn Turman, who was almost Han Solo and I think was married to Lena Horne. Am I remembering right? And it's got Robert Hooks from all those Star Trek movies, Moses Gunn. I want to see this.
And it's Richard Pryor at his most Richard Pryor, his early 70s Richard Pryor. It's very...
I assume he's the wisecracking...
He is, yeah. And he, and it covers a lot of this energy, but one of the plot points is that in occupied Germany, the German, like a German woman is also less racist than the American soldiers fighting alongside them, right? Like they take refuge in a house of a blonde Hausfrau.
How plausible do you find this?
Well, it's a polemical film. It's not pulling any punches. Pretty astonishing to be an ABC movie of the week with the tone of it is
if the upshot is the Germans were better on race in the late 40s in the early 40s than America was.
Yeah. So I recommend watching it. It doesn't have like modern production values, but it's really it's intense. It's intense to see a 1970 take on World War II racial politics.
Written by Aaron Spelling. It's interesting that the Black Power and Black is Beautiful were mainstream enough that Aaron Spelling is pitching projects to ABC, trying to capture this zeitgeist and this audience.
Yeah, and funny, I'm sure that when they pitched it, they were like, Richard Pryor's really hot right now, and Billy D. Williams, and then the vibe of the movie is a little more strident maybe than, although Richard Pryor's comedy in 1970 was too. So,
and this has been John Roderick's TV movie reviews. Next time, Brian's song.
And that concludes the Battle of Bamber Bridge. Entry 104.HE1302, certificate number 53093 in the omnibus. Future links in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are archived at Omnibus Project. Our handles were at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick. I've been sneaking back on social media and I'm ashamed of myself.
You were on the Facebook group even.
Yeah, don't let me do it. Although there's nothing any of you can do about it.
I could text you and say, get off the internet.
You could.
But then you're looking at that on your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
I should send you a passenger pigeon that says, or a messenger pigeon that says, get off the internet.
Yeah. If you just brought me a cookie every time you came, that might be enough.
Is that true? You would save the cookie for your moment of temptation later in the week?
No. If you brought me a donut or a cookie, something nice, a little treat every time, and then you would have leverage to threaten me. You would say, I'm not going to bring you a donut if I see you on, basically bad cop, no donut.
I'm going to withhold your treat next time.
I'm very motivated by treats.
I really am too. It's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is terrible. My
metabolism has got to the point where I should not be motivated by treats. They fitted me for Jeopardy suits before the pandemic. And now they're a little tight.
Now you fill them like they're a sausage casing.
I look like a Richard Scary pig with the buttons on the shirt at the point of popping.
Boing. Yeah, I just pulled 3 suits out of storage to go to go back east, and I definitely found that I could only take 2 of them because one of them was no longer.
That's a pre-COVID suit.
Couldn't squeeze in.
So what if instead of a donut, I bring you maybe some hummus and raw vegetable platter? Doesn't that sound good, John?
You could probably
a little baba ganoush.
You probably threaten me with that.
If you don't get off the internet, I'm going to bring hummus again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might work.
You can email us longer form like rants at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can go on Facebook and complain about the show, complain about the fact that, I mean, basically everything we talked about in this show is an opportunity for somebody to complain about the way we handled it.
I think we can all get together on race in the 40s as being bad.
Yeah, but
you can't teach that in schools in half the country.
Right. But you and I are pretty glib, and people that do not have their tone calibrated correctly might think we were being glib about things.
I disagree. I think
we're being glib about other things.
I think we have been very clear about the moral imperative here.
That's true.
We're poking some well-deserved fun at the racists on the front lines of it in this particular case.
Yes.
I don't think they deserve any particular respect, and I don't think Carter's Army star Richard Pryor would say any different.
But glibness is very hard to parse for a very small minority of the people in the world, but they're a vocal minority.
We should program your Alexa here every time we say the word racism or something to say, which is wrong.
See?
So we would just pause and Alexa would say, which is wrong.
We're against it. We're against it, not for it. Also, is it compatible with Marxism? Yes or no?
Which? Exporting
Racism.
Jim Crow?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Racism is incompatible
with
Marxism. It was, they scored big points during the Cold War about how bad race relations were going.
They did. And as we know, Russia, completely without racism.
I mean, they were probably killing a bunch of Georgians and Ukrainians and Armenians and all manner of people. Baltic peoples. Who knows?
Yeah. There's a lot of anti-Estonian racism right now in Russia. But it's because Estonia is giving 30% of its GDP to Ukraine.
Ooh. Is that going to go bad?
For Russia.
Well, if Peter the Great is the model, I mean, they could just move into the Baltics next.
That, I think, is why Estonia is giving 30% of their GDP to Ukraine.
Better them than us.
You can, although
Are we being glib again?
we're doing pretty good about giving Ukraine stuff. I mean, we have a large GDP. Let's be honest.
We've given Ukraine...
America's pretty killer.
As we record this, we're giving Ukraine so much stuff, they can't get trained on it in time. They can't get it to the...
No, don't shush, because we're going to get letters. Okay. People are going to write to theomnibusproject@gmail.com and tell UCAN that you don't know anything about Ukraine.
All right. You'll probably tell me that too.
No, I won't. You can mail us things, and I see here on the desk a package that of all the things that you would pay $20 to mail, I can't believe this is the thing that came in the mail.
Well, if you'll recall from an addenda show, maybe back in the spring, I can't remember when this happened.
Oh, you were going to say back in the 70s.
Back in the 70s, we did an addenda show about Carter's Army.
I remember.
And about whether or not Glenn Turman was married to Lena Horne. I guess I really should look that up. Hey Google, was Glenn Turman married to Lena Horne?
Hey Google.
I still don't know. A listener named Jonathan wanted to send us, after we did a show about Fanta, is that right? Told me that he's a New Englander. Aretha Franklin. He was married to Aretha Franklin.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Those of you who have been yelling at me for like 20 minutes, stand down. It's Aretha Franklin. But he was almost Han Solo. And he's the mayor in The Wire. A listener named Jonathan from New England wanted to send us his own part of the world's Diet Dr. Pepper equivalent, delicious Diet Moxie.
What is his part of the world? Freaking New England.
He's from New Hampshire. Moxie, I believe, is a Maine invention.
Yeah.
It's one of the many fine regional sodas of Maine. Does it get across the border into New Brunswick? Unclear. We may never know.
What's interesting about Maine is they have pretty good seafood, but I would not turn to them for pop.
Is that right? You wouldn't order a lobster roll and then say, and I'd like a real kind of Dr. Pepper with a bitter aftertaste.
Here's what's crazy. They sent a half rack of Diet Moxie.
I think he knows I'm a Diet Dr. Pepper drinker. Ergo, this
Yeah.
would be the closest Maine equivalent.
Here I am, right here.
He's got that famous Maine hospitality.
He does. The famous Maine hospitality.
You would rather drink a full sugar Moxie, of course.
I would drink. Right now, I would try a full sugar Moxie, but I will not try a Diet Moxie.
We talked about
Sam, I
we
am.
talked about the creepy druggist
Yep.
leering at you like Peter Lorre on the can.
There he is.
At the time, he was asking for a home address for one of us because you
Ooh,
can't.
the weird.
Yes,
Peter Lorre.
Yeah, the ghost of Peter Lorre. John, where do you live? I'm going to come to your house. No, Jonathan wanted to send it. Apparently, he thought you couldn't send pop to a P.O. box, and maybe that's true.
Maybe it is. How did he get around it?
A listener sent in a life hack, which is do not send it to P.O. Box blah, blah, blah. with a zip code.
55744 Shoreline, Washington 98155.
You can always send stuff there, but not if it's pop. If you want a street address, look up the street address of our of that particular North City, Seattle post office and send it there to apartment number 55744. As if on that part of Aurora, there is an apartment building with 55,000 units.
Interesting. So,
And then not knowing that it's a P.O. box, the post office will deliver it, and presumably at the end, they'll be like, we've been foiled by this apartment P.O. box scheme.
well, wait a minute. Now let's P.O. Box 55744 Shoreline.
What are you trying to find? Do you want the street address of
Yeah.
that? It's the North City post office. Let me see.
Oh, wow. The first thing that comes up is your name at fanmail.biz.
See, this is why that box is full of people wanting me to sign their baseball cards and
I
Alex
see.
Trebek Funko Pops.
So it's not this one in Montlake Terrace? No, that's something.
No,
else.
that's some kind of annex. Oh, no. There's a post office in Mount Terrace. I used to live up there. It's 18336 Aurora Avenue, Suite 105. So the post office has to believe this is both has a suite and an apartment number, and that the apartment number is 5 digits.
All right, say that again. Let me write it down.
18336
336
Aurora Avenue North. What are you trying to have people send you?
Avenue. No, well, I'm just suggesting
Suite 105.
Suite 105.
And somehow this single suite has about 56,000 apartments because it's then apartment number 55744.
and 98155. Apartment number. Well, what I'm trying to do is if there is a way to game this system, why do we ever give them the P.O. box? Why don't we always just say, send us your stuff to 18336 Aurora Avenue North, Suite 105, apartment 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155.
What if they get wise to us? What if they see what we're doing? I think we need to limit this to emergency cases like when we need 12 Diet Moxies.
Well, okay, I understand what you're saying.
Now,
but-
these have not traveled well. Maybe this is the reason why you don't.
Well, that one's kind of exploded.
They're all kind of exploded. Maybe this is the reason why you don't send
because
Diet Moxie to the...
Yeah, it went up in an airplane.
Yes.
And then they're lucky it didn't explode. They just popped. They just got big, but they didn't blow.
Are we ready to take the Diet Moxie challenge here?
Oh my God.
Do you
Are
think
we
it's-
really going
do
to
you think
do
it's
this?
still under pressure? It can't be, right? The top of mine is so warped. There we go.
Okay. Diet Moxie. I really don't want this, but
No, take a swig. It's going to be delicious.
here we go. Yep, smells like root beer / medicine.
The first bite, the first taste is root beer,
and then
then it quickly becomes cough medicine.
aspartame. The problem is I
don't
can't.
mind the
Now that I've opened this, I can't put it down because the bottom's all round.
Yeah, you're going to have to do what they do in Maine and just chug it and then smash it against your forehead. That's how you drink a Diet Moxie in the Pine Tree State.
Well, now look, the initial taste I really like. It's a nice combination of kind of root beer,
It's a less
Dr.
sweet
Pepper.
root beer.
I would totally drink this if it didn't have
But
aspartame as an aftertaste.
well, the bitter taste you're not getting is not the aspartame. Aspartame's nature's own deliciousness. What you're
Oh my
tasting is
God.
gentian root.
No, I like the root. I don't like the fake sugar.
Okay, the fake sugar you can probably taste, but do you know how like now you have a bitter taste in your mouth from this? Like you just woke up from a ill-advised
I have a
30-minute nap?
bitter taste in my mouth because this person sent us Diet Moxie instead of regular Moxie.
That's a bitter taste in your soul.
Yeah.
The bitter taste in your mouth is gentian root, which is added to Moxie specifically to give you that bitter medicinal taste that Mainers crave. The Downeasters love.
But as an American, I love my pop to taste like medicine, which is a thing that all those Fanta drinkers in Germany can't understand.
It is funny how it tastes like root beer for a second, then cough syrup for another second, and then like something died for about a minute. This is perfect. Jonathan, thank you. And also, I can't remember the unnamed listener who told us about this.
I bet they have a name.
To way to thwart the P.O. Box. Unnamed in this entry. Not unnamed in real life.
One of the rare Americans that never got a name.
Yeah, it's a sovereign citizens thing. They can't pull you over for your post office related, for your mail fraud, for your mail soda fraud, if your name begins with a vowel and 2 consonants or something.
Let me just add that if you do not have the wherewithal to send a case of Diet Moxie through the mails, but you would like to support the show.
Is there a second way to support the show besides sending us regional diet sodas?
Yes. You can go to patreon.com/omnibus and join our omnibus cadre. You can't set that down. It's exploded.
I'm kind of leaning it on a corner between 2 things, and nothing could go wrong.
That's gonna work.
Is this why pop cans don't have rounded bottoms?
So that you can put them down on a table? Yes.
Live and learn.
That's one. I'm sure when they were designing cans, they were like, "Why don't we put a graceful round bottom on this can?"
They need to weight this like a Weeble, so it'll wobble in a fun way.
Oh, what a good idea!
If the bottom were just thicker, it could be rounded.
Yeah, that's what you want out of a can, for it to be like a Weeble.
I'm gonna have to drink all this, and I'm always turning it so the weird guy faces me as I take a sip. Oh, in fact, it seems to be set up that way.
It's meant to do.
Look
that.
how he's right on my case. He's right below the lip of the
I think that
pop top.
Might be coincidence. Patreon.com/omnibus project and join the cadre of futurelings who support the show.
Listeners, from our vantage point, in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, however, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.